Hopefully they're not calling Josh Harris. They're calling the GM, who then talks to Josh Harris and gives him a recommendation.
Of course, yeah. You know who they're not calling? Dan Snyder. Thank God. Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, how you doing?
Doing good. Just
we didn't lose today.
No, didn't lose today. Got to play some golf. I know you were dialed in scouting. I took a day off from football. I watched a little bit of the quad box this morning. I had some Lions Bears going. I had some Saints Panthers going. Neither particularly great games, and then I broke off to the golf course. Figured you get an open Sunday, you got to take advantage of it, especially out here with the weather.
Tommy broke 90. He only played 9 holes, but he broke 90.
Only played 9 holes, and hey, Bryson DeChambeau shot a 58. Everybody was talking about how crazy that was. Bryson, I shot a 51 today. So come after me, boss. I got you. Don't ask me how many holes I shot, but I got you.
Sounds like you played pretty well. Tom's just starting out, so
figuring it out. More good holes than bad, so that's what matters. But anyways,
keep going out there.
All you could do.
Yeah.
Anyways, little different this week with the bye week. We're kind of trying to figure out things to talk about. So we're going to talk a little Rams Commanders. Do almost like a pregame pod for this one today. And talk just a little bit more around the league, and then we got a little bit of draft talk, believe it or not, to get into later on in the episode. So stick around for that if you guys are already thinking about the draft. But first things first, Pop. Pretty open-ended question here, but what do you want to see the rest of the season? What most are you looking for? I think you can go ahead and give me a top 3 if you want, maybe. But what do you want to see? We've got the Rams, the Jets on the road, the 49ers at home, and the Cowboys at home to end the year. So heck of a schedule.
Crazy schedule, yeah. I mean, you just can't expect for maybe, I guess the closest one of that group would be the Jets game, depending on I don't know what the latest news is on Aaron Rodgers, right? But anyway, yeah. Good tough way to go. But you know what? The boys are going to be in LA, SoFi Stadium, together.
Sir.
And we're going to probably give you some really good content from that. I thought about this, and the 3 things you want to see. Number one's obvious, probably on your list. You want to see what Sam Howell can do in these last 4 games. And I was thinking about it, and it's going to be a topic later, but in a way, Sam can help control his own fate because he can put some wins up, move higher up that draft board, and meaning, we have a higher pick rather than a lower pick in the early part of the draft. He can make it a lot more difficult for us to pick a quarterback in that first round. Whereas if we're top 3 or 4, it's going to be really tempting. So I want to see, Sam perform well these last 4 weeks. I want to see this team show fight competitiveness. There's some tough games in there, but, I would love it if we could just be competitive, not get blown out, show some fight, show some character. That's really been missing these last few weeks. And we need to get that back, see if we can get that back. And then my third thing would be just young players, right? Give these young guys an opportunity, the KJ Henrys, the Emmanuel Forbes, the Quan Martins, on offense, maybe see a little bit more of Rodriguez getting some more touches. Let's see these young players get their chance, get their touches. Sam Cosmi, a guy that we want to rely on in the long term, although he's been playing a lot. I think that for me is probably most important. Let's give these younger players an opportunity. You want to win, no question about it. But at this point, we all know what's going to happen at the end of this season. Let's see these young guys go out and ball. Maybe see a little bit more of Jahan Dotson as well. So those are my 3. Pretty simple.
answer your question on Sam Cosmi, that answer is no. But let's keep it moving here. Let's keep it moving. He to give credit where credit's due. He's been one of our better linemen this year, but I just don't want to see any of those five ever again if I have the choice. But top three things for me rest of the season. It's kind of hard to give a unique top three, so I think I'm just gonna kind of spout a little more off of yours because it's pretty much exactly the same for me. There's
Right.
only so much for you to look for from a 4-8 ball club at this point in the year that's just
Right.
clearly bottoming out and headed towards a full rebuild, right?
4-9.
Yeah, 4-9, geez. Um, so I want to elaborate a little further on some of the players I'm looking at. I really want to get an eye on Benjamin St. Juste. That's one guy I want to see what's going on with him. That's a guy that coming into the year we were high on. Now, during the year, he's completely fallen off. I know the secondary is just such a victim of this terrible man scheme we've got going on right now, but I want to see how he works. I'd like to see him maybe get a pick or get his name called a little bit better. I'm keeping an eye on Emmanuel Forbes as well. Where's his head at? How's he doing? Another guy I'm interested in is Brian Robinson. What do we see from B Rob down the stretch here? I know he's kind of dealing with a hamstring. I think for all intents and purposes, I don't even think that was an injury. I think maybe it was a little uncomfortable and they pulled him because we were getting blown out. And we had a bye week coming up. I'm sure he's fine. I want to see what's going on with him, because he's been really effective for stretches, and we've had several games where we've been like he's the best offensive player on this team by a mile, but he's also been very ineffective for
Yeah, but
stretches.
don't you
So
think
I'm
every time he's been
interested to
given the
kind of see where that
opportunity,
goes.
he's looked good?
Yeah, it's a chicken or an egg kind of thing, right?
To
Because it's is
me,
he
B Rob's a proven entity already. I've seen
fair enough.
enough.
Fair enough. I want to see more from him. I want to see him continue to establish himself as an absolute alpha running back one. Antonio Gibson's going into a contract year, so that's an interesting situation there as well. I think at this point we know who he is. Not sure there's much more to evaluate there, and then great point from you, Pop, on Sam. Sam is in a lot of ways in control of his own destiny over these next 4 weeks, and I know that's something that Ron loves to talk about, right? Controlling your own fate, controlling your own destiny, whatever. So it's ironic we're in this position with Sam where we've seen some good, we've seen some not so good. As I put it in our last episode, I'm not sure he's been the problem. He also hasn't been a solution. So where are we with that? And like you said, if he can pull out 2-3 wins, maybe we fall out of the top five, maybe we even fall out of the top 10. Who knows? And all of a sudden now, maybe Bo Nix or Penix Jr., some of these guys you project to be later in the first round, maybe they're not looking as intriguing. Maybe you don't have to make the decision on a Jaden Daniels or a Drake May or even a Caleb Williams. Who knows? Um, Maybe that changes the way we look at things, and maybe we say, okay, give Sam one more year, get that left tackle, because if all these quarterbacks are going up the board and getting pushed up the board, what that also means is all those elite prospects. Now you're looking at maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't even go until 4, maybe he doesn't even go until 5. You're looking at the tackles, the kid from Penn State, the
Right.
kid from Notre Dame. Maybe they start to fall down the board as well. Joe Alt is a kid from Notre Dame. Maybe they're there at 8, maybe they're there at 9, and maybe you say, okay, let's get a generational left tackle. And if Sam really stinks it up next year, we'll be back in the top 5 and we'll get a quarterback then. That's the New York Giants way. You just stay in the top 5 every year so you can just kind of swing it whatever. It's interesting. It is really interesting. For me, I'm just not that concerned with wins and losses, to be honest with you. I agree with you on that. I want to see some fight. I'd like to compete, but at the end of the day, we are at that point in the year where just statistically and mathematically speaking, a loss is more valuable than a win right now, and it sucks. And I'm never going to
Yeah,
root for a loss
maybe the
as a
wins and
fan,
losses.
but I still want to see them play well.
Yeah, maybe the wins and losses aren't as important. I mean, it always feels better to win for me. And
agreed, 100%.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think with Sam, I think it's just there's I understand both sides of that argument for sure. But I also kind of feel like a lot of what he's done is pretty special. And he is a first year player, and he's a first year player on an absolutely horrible football team,
Yeah.
And I think that um, I just kind of feel like he's been more the solution than the problem.
Yeah.
If we're gonna weight it on the scale, and um, you know,
He's a
but
victim.
the
He's a
reality
victim.
is, the reality is, if you're staring at a top 3 or 4 pick, and one of those top 3 quarterbacks, which we're going to get into the quarterback situation later in the
Yeah.
pod, so stay tuned. We're going to talk about the top prospects. Jason Lockenfora had a great article in the Washington Post, so we're going to recap that a little bit. I think so. It's an interesting situation where Sam and Eric and others. These last 4 games mean something. They mean something for these players because if you want to be part of it next year, and you got to believe Sam's thinking, he's hearing the noise, and if you
Yeah.
want to be part of this situation next year, or even for that matter, other opportunities within the NFL, it matters how you play these last 4 games. I feel like it always feels good to win. I'm not that worried about draft position as much as I want to see these guys perform as best they can. So, but anyway,
There
we'll
it
see
is.
how it goes. We'll be watching.
Yeah, we'll be watching. That's one thing for sure. We'll be there in person, so we'll be cheering the boys on. And let's get into the scouting report, Pop. Uh,
That's
week
it.
four,
Love it.
and we got a little week 14 recap as well at the end of the scouting report here. But let's get into that. So the Rams today lost 37-31, absolute heartbreaker on the road against the Ravens
Great
after a
game.
3-game winning streak. So breaks their winning streak. They were hot. They were playing well. Pop watched the game. Said it was super close. It was a great game. Obviously, the Ravens won on a punt return in overtime. And it's wild for that Ravens defense, as great as they are. They found themselves in a few shootouts too. It's pretty crazy. But
Yeah.
that offense is still also very good. It's a Super Bowl team there. But yeah, so the Rams, I think, are much better than their record at this point in the year. I think they're a pretty good football team. They dealt with some injuries. They're very well coached. It's kind of the Mike Tomlin effect with Sean McVay out there. You just kind of don't, you can't count them out with a coach like that, and you expect that even if they might not have the most talent on the roster this year, even if they might not be in the best position, you kind of expect that they will still compete and will still be strong. Aaron Donald is obviously somebody you just got to always have an eye out for, and I mean, jeez, God bless Chris Paul this week dealing with that, and Sam Cosmi and Tyler Larson. That's our plan for Aaron Donald
Wow.
this week. So that's make of that what you will. Kyron Williams is obviously very explosive back for them. Just seems to get a ton of touches and make big plays. He's not the fastest guy in the world. Didn't have a crazy 40-yard dash or anything like that, but good player. And then Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua, the two of them are special as well and just great route runners, and they're just going to get the ball a lot. And of course, at the helm of all of it is Matt Stafford, who's a guy that I think is still pretty slept on right now. I think he's better than the numbers show, and I think he's a guy that he's just going to carve a defense like this up. I mean, if you make it easy for Stafford, he's going to tear you a new one. That's
Yeah.
how that works. I think it's you got to really make him play outside of himself, and
Well,
I'm just not sure
he
we have
threw
the
for 3
capability.
touchdowns against the Ravens defense, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, his percentage wasn't great, 23 of 41, but still had almost 300 yards.
Yeah,
It's a big day. Yeah. I mean, they clearly look like by far a better football team than we are right now watching that Ravens game. Heck of a game. I don't know. I lost count trying to count through it, but there were at least 8 lead changes and 2 ties, and Ravens win on a thriller with a punt return in overtime. Like, heck of a
wild.
football game, back and forth. It was kind of fun just to watch a game without emotion. Really good football game. But yeah, no, I think the Rams are going to be a problem. There's nothing that's going to make me feel really optimistic. We'll get in our keys to the game and a prediction, then our midweek pod to do a little bit of a second part of the preview. But yeah, I think they're playing really well at the right time. They're in the hunt for a playoff spot. Again, I think it's one of those similar ones. Our offense is going to have to put up some points. Are we ready to do that?
Yeah.
It's gonna be tough.
But and their defense isn't as good.
Dom and Palm factor is in effect. We're undefeated on the road. Just let me remind you that.
That's true. So for those of y'all who are on the bad news for the tanking part of the fan base, but yeah, that's pretty much a Rams scouting report. Other notable NFL scores today. Let's just go through them real quick. Bears 28-13 over the Lions. They're like the Giants for the Lions. They find a way every time they play them.
That's good for the draft position.
That's very good for the draft position. Browns 31-27 over the Jags. Joe Flacco out of nowhere off the top rope. Joe Flacco straight from Pebble Beach with 3 touchdown passes. Yeah. 49ers staying hot, 28-17 over the Seahawks. Bills 2017 over the Chiefs with that gutting offsides call on 19 there at the end of the game. That was tough to see because what a cool play design and what a way to get a win there.
He was clearly offsides, but you hate to see a foul that has absolutely zero impact on a play. Because it had zero impact on the play, but he clearly was lined up offside.
I really think there should be a rule. I know you have like advantage in soccer where you don't blow the whistle if a team's in a fortuitous position, even if there's been a foul. And I know it's a little bit different because it's the team that's
totally
the victim
different
in soccer. But I would love to see if there was something similar to that in football where like if it's a foul, like you'll see like a great catch on the right side of the field get called back because there was OPI on the left side of the field and the ball was never going there in the first place. I wish there was like a impact of the play threshold you had to cross in order to get a foul called if it's a scoring play or if it's a play past 10 yards or something like that. But
so you think if a guy lines up offside, you shouldn't call it?
I wish if the guy's lined up offsides and like you just said, it has no impact on the play at all. I wish there was some kind of discretion to which you could say, okay, it's a scoring play. It has no impact on the play. He was, 6 inches ahead of where he should have been. Whatever. I mean,
I hear from you in the comments, people.
I said the exact same thing you said, but you spun it so you could bust my balls.
No, I didn't say you should change the rule. I just said it was unfortunate.
You said you hate to see something that has no impact on the game.
Yeah, you hate to see it. It's unfortunate, but a dude lines up offside. You got to throw the flag.
So my bad.
You're
fix the
you're asking for a rule change.
World. My bad for trying to fix the unfortunate circumstances in this world. I know it's terrible of me. That's terrible.
One of them golf balls at you, Dad.
Trying to do right by the people. Man, the things you choose to highlight, it's incredible. And Eagles Cowboys is in progress as we're recording right now. That's pretty much it. Kickouts of the day. Vikings. Am I reading that right? The Vikings beat the Raiders 3-0?
3-0. First points were scored with 1:57 left in the game.
That's pretty insane.
That's the first 3-0 score since 2007.
That is pretty insane. So tough day for you if you've got any Vikings or Raiders on your fantasy teams and you need a win. But yeah, that's pretty much it for current
the lowest NFL scoring game in 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you have a lower? I mean, the only
there's been 0-0 ties. It was back in the 1940s.
Wow.
We had some people over today. We were Googling it as we were watching, the score flash up of that game.
Was the forward pass legal at that point? I mean, that's so long ago. I mean, that was like It's a whole world war ago.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yep.
that's wild. Yeah. Well,
The
what are you gonna
last
do?
3-0 game was Pittsburgh beat Miami on November 26th, 2007.
Hey, and you know what?
It's only the third in the last 40 years.
In an alternate universe, we're booting up for the Dom and Pop Vikings Talk podcast, and we're saying, hey, look, all the wins count the same. Win's a win.
Could you imagine
So,
sitting through that game?
you got to start drinking at a certain point, right?
I mean,
You
it was
got
in
to.
Vegas. That's the only consolation prize there for
That one
Kit
almost
Wow.
makes it worse because imagine you're in Vegas and you could have spent 4 hours gambling, and instead you're sitting at that football game. Oof, that's brutal.
Woo.
But anyways, let's get on to the next topic today, which is we teased it a little bit earlier. We're going to talk top QBs, where the QB situation is heading in the draft next year. Essentially, Jason LaCanfora had a great article in the Washington Post talking about QBs and why are we interested in that? Because we very well might be drafting in the top 5, and we also very well might need a quarterback. So, a quote Pop kind of clipped is that a veteran evaluator who's watching class closely says, quote, people really like this group. It's deep. I wouldn't be surprised if 6 go in the first round. I really
Wow.
wouldn't. There are 3 for me who belong at the top of the draft, top 5 picks. I'll bet you at least 4 go in the top 10, probably 5, and somebody will grab one at the bottom of the round. And they also went on to say that teams like New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and Atlanta, who typically have not been willing to use a first round draft pick on a quarterback, might do so here. Those kind of fringe wild card
It's
later
going to
on
get
in the
crazy.
early top 10 picks.
It's
Yeah,
going
it's
to
going
get
to be
crazy.
wild.
You think of the Bears sitting there with that first pick, and Justin Fields is playing really well.
Yeah,
They've got the first pick, and I guess their pick right now is the 5th or 4th or 5th. We're 4th, they're 5th. I mean, imagine the power that they've got in their hands in terms of teams might be wanting to trade up, or do you just go for it with a Caleb Williams? I mean, they got a big decision to make there, but they almost,
yeah, they do.
in a way, it's almost a can't lose. I'd be tempted if teams got crazy with the offer. I'd be tempted to stick with Justin and just take a bounty of picks.
Well, I mean, they're in a situation. This is going to be ironic because when I talk about my take on the Commanders later, but they're in a situation where, I don't know who you stick back there on that team and have play quarterback and they win. That team is just terrible. They're in really rough shape, top to bottom on that roster. I know they won today, but that roster is in really rough shape. You got to wonder what the deal is with the front office there with the GM. I don't know if he's going to be up for consideration come Black Monday, but I think organizationally, as crazy as it sounds, with a guy like Caleb Williams, it's like a double-edged sword too, because Caleb Williams is being touted as he's going to come in the league and play like Patrick Mahomes. Like he is being held at such a crazy high regard, like we haven't seen since Andrew Luck. So if you can get 4 first-round picks, if you can get 3 firsts and 3 seconds, if you can get something crazy, if you can get like a star lineman and 3 firsts, something wild, I don't know how you don't do that if you're the Chicago Bears and you have Justin Fields and you have another year to check him out and maybe bring in a better. You got to imagine there's a better offensive mind out there than Matt Eberflus that could maybe utilize his talents a little bit better. You got to look at Brian Johnson out in Philly as maybe a good match for them, but I would really consider moving
maybe
out of that.
Harbaugh played there. Maybe he wants to go back and resurrect the Bears. Never know.
A lot of talk. There is talk about that. There is talk about that.
They've got interest in EB too. So
yeah.
I mean, I think it's very interesting. I think with Caleb Williams, does he want to play in Chicago? He's made some noise about wanting to pick his team. So, it'd be interesting to see what they could do to orchestrate that top spot. And I take a little bit of issue with something you said with the Commanders. I don't think we need a quarterback, personally.
I didn't
I
say we
think.
needed a quarterback.
Well, you
I
said
said
we
we
might
need
need. You might
might
need a
need
quarterback, right?
two different
I
things.
don't personally think that's the situation we're in. We said it. I think you and I both agreed on this, and I'm picking on your words. I know it may not be exactly how you feel,
I'll clarify
but
after you finish.
I think that we both said it. Maybe you've changed your mind. I'm perfectly fine going into next year with Sam Howell, but we're going to get into this list, and let's get into it pretty quick. If you got the ability to take one of these guys, and you're the new GM of this team, we were having this conversation today, with your uncles. I was having this conversation. If you're that guy, how do you not go quarterback with how do you not do it? How do you not pull the trigger for one of these top guys if you've got the opportunity to do it? And I think that is in lies the rub. It's not so
Yeah.
much that Sam isn't good enough to be our starter next year. I think he is, and I think he could do a lot of really good team things if we build around him. But how do you pass up on these guys? Now, I mean, we all said it. We've said it many times. These top quarterbacks, it's like a 50-50 gamble. So that's the other side of that coin. So it's
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah. You touched on a lot of great things. I'm going to elaborate on Pop. I said might need because do we get Philly Sam or do we get Buffalo Sam for the next 4 weeks? That's going to determine. That's going to make a big push by April. That's going to be there's 4 more weeks of tape on Howell, and what do we see during those 4 weeks? And if it's 4 stinkers, then you have to look at the median, which is not great. But we'll see on that. In terms of what you're saying with the GM, I think you made a great point, and I think that you have to look at how we look at that 2020 draft. And unfortunately, things didn't work out with Chase. But we look back on it and we say, "Oh my God, Burrow went one, Herbert, Tua went after that, and we didn't get any of them somehow, and we picked at number 2." And what people forget is that we had Haskins, rest in peace. We had Haskins that was going to be the starter no matter what. And if we do this again, but he didn't end up working out, and so that clears people's memories. If we do this again with Howell, and Howell doesn't work out after 1 or 2 more years, we're going to be looking back going, oh my God,
Yeah,
Drake
no
May
doubt.
was going to be there, Jaden Daniels was going to be there, and we're not going to remember the fact
And
that
that's what you can't
Howell
let
actually
happen if
showed
you're the
some good
GM.
stuff. Yeah,
No, we're in
exactly.
agreement
And
with that. We're in agreement with that. I
just wanted to
think.
draw that parallel to the
I mean, I'm picking
2020
on
draft.
you again, and we need to get to the QB list and the top back on topic, this is a great debate. I think saying Philly, Buffalo is a little unfair. Yeah, Philly was one of the best. The Buffalo was a one-off bad performance. I think in every other game, I think he's given you some really good, maybe not all consistent. Whether that's a
Yeah.
great second half performance or, I think even in Miami, if you go back and watch, there's some really good stuff in there from Sam. I know that's hard to say in a 45-10 loss. So I think for the most part, he's brought it every week. But I just think I totally agree with you. You can't stare at that quarterback and not make a move if you're the new GM of this team. That's just the circumstance. If you're a big Sam Howell fan, you might say it's an unfortunate circumstance. But you know what? We still have Sam Howell. So this draft pick doesn't work out. There's a fallback position which we can rely on. But let's talk a little bit about these top QBs and dig in a little more to this article. So what's the take on this top group? Who are those guys that are going in the top 5?
You got number 1, Caleb Williams, USC. You know everything about him. Local kid, stud. If there was any world in which we ended up with him, I'm going streaking. That would be crazy. I don't care. You can talk all you want about the nail painting and the being soft and blah, blah, blah. I think that's all BS. I'm not so worried about that. Number 2, Drake May, North Carolina, Sam Howell's successor. That could be kind of funny, those two looking at each other in the locker room. But he's a stud, man. He's a big body, solid, dual threat kind of quarterback. Not necessarily dual threat in like a Justin Fields type of way, but maybe more of like a Josh Allen-esque big arm, can move, can make plays.
NFL ready is what it says in here.
Yeah, yeah, big fan of his game. Again, this is another guy I'd be stoked. Number three, Jaden Daniels. This is a guy that's kind of came on this year more in the scope of things and has become obviously just won the Heisman. He's kind of you're looking at he's almost like the Anthony Richardson of this year,
Yeah,
you know, a
a
little
little
more
more,
volatile.
right.
But look at what Anthony Richardson did when he was healthy. Jaden Daniels for me is the guy that I would love to see. And I think that's the most realistic option. And I think having a legitimate dual threat quarterback, that is the type of talent that can make up for deficiencies elsewhere on the roster if we hit. And that's the kind of talent that can get us to competing right away and then building up and getting better and then contending within a few years. So I love to see, and that also goes for Drake May and Caleb Williams, of course, but just not as realistic that they're going to be available. I think Jaden Daniels, if the board stays the way it is today, I think he's there at 4 because I don't think Arizona takes a quarterback. That's barring trades and whatever. Number 4, Michael Penix Jr., Washington. A lot of experience on this guy and a lot of experience on Jaden Daniels as well, over 50 starts. So that's kind of the difference between him and Anthony Richardson. Um, but Michael Penix Jr. stud as well. He's playing out in Washington. They're undefeated this year. Obviously, they got a good team. We got to see what happens with him in the college football playoffs. I think that's going to have a decent impact on his draft stock as well. And if he wants to push into that top 4, top 5, wouldn't hate taking him at 4 either. If that's how we feel, it's just going to come down to how Sam looks as well. And then number 5, you got Bo Nix. I'm going to start going through a few more of these a little bit faster. You got Bo Nix at Oregon, clearly the number 5 out of that group. And then you got JJ McCarthy from Michigan as well is another person that people are kind of keeping an eye on. Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy are guys that I think you start to wonder if you get down to that part of the draft board and you're about to pick is Harrison Jr. available? Is one of those left tackles that we really like available? Do we love them? That's where you start to ask
Well,
questions.
yeah. I mean, I think
But
that's the thing, and you said it. You said it in the last pod beautifully, or one of the last couple of pods. We have Sam Howell gives us options, and I don't personally like the idea of reaching for a Penix Jr. in the top. We're going to have a top 5 pick. We're going to have a top
yeah,
5 or 6 pick. We're not dropping to 8 or 9. That's just not happening, right? I mean,
yeah,
we kind of know the way this is going to go. I think it's more likely we're going to climb the board than drop from 4. I mean, Chicago's starting to create some space between us now.
yeah,
They've essentially got a 2-game lead over us for that 5th spot because of the win today, and they beat us head to head. I don't know how the tiebreak works. I'm
it's
just
the strength
assuming
of
so.
schedule.
I don't want to reach for a Penix Jr. or a Bo Nix in that spot based on what we know today and where those guys are rated on the draft board. If you can get one of those
Agreed.
top 3 guys, I don't think you can bypass that. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna, regardless of what the Commanders do. This is a great article by Jason Lockenfor. Check it out if you haven't already. We don't know the guy, but he's a longtime reporter of the Skins back in the day. But it's just going to get wild, and I think watching what teams like Chicago, you mentioned Arizona at number 3. What are they going to do? You know, they got Kyler Murray on the payroll. Any one of those 3 passes, and we're sitting at 4, then one of those 3 guys is available to us.
Mm,
It's going to be
mm,
really, really exciting and
yeah,
interesting. Plenty of things for Donald Pop to talk about in the offseason.
yeah, and you
Very
got to
excited.
wonder with you know something that I think is interesting at that spot we're at behind Arizona. You got to wonder what's the price to move up from 3 to 4, from 4 to 3, if it stays that way. If it stays that way, and they call Josh Harris and they say, "Hey, I'm not going quarterback here. We want Marvin Harrison Jr. Well, we're selling this pick. We can only get him if we move back to 4. I wonder how that shakes out. I had that thought earlier today.
I think we got plenty
Got
of
all
time
the time to talk
about that.
it. But yeah,
yeah, it's an interesting scenario, for sure.
Yeah, and obviously we'll see. I don't know necessarily the free agent picture. We'll have to take a look
And
at that.
Hopefully they're not calling Josh Harris. They're calling the GM, who then talks to Josh Harris and gives him a recommendation.
Of course, yeah. You know who they're not calling? Dan Snyder. Thank God. Let's wrap this podcast up. What do you say, Bob?
I tell you what, can I say something? Can I inject one thing?
Please.
Will Ferrell, famous line in Old School, said, "That's how you debate. Son, that's how you podcast."
Yes,
Bye week, and the boys brought it. Some great topics.
Yes,
Gotta love it. If I say so my damn self, that's how you podcast.
Love that. With that note, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Guys, if you're still here, you're enjoying hanging with us. We'll send you some poncha crema. Just leave us in the comments and prove that you're of age. But let's wrap this thing up. Without further ado, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thanks for another great week, guys.